Let me ask you this.
Have
we currently contained ISIL?
We have not contained ISIL.
Have they been contained at any time since 2010?
Tactically, in areas they have been. Strategically, they have spread since 2010.
Remind me not to get in an argument with this next guest, Virginia Republican Congressman Randy Forbes. Obviously, what you were trying to get at is whether ISIL, whatever all these crazies are contained, and you had an admission, no, not anytime soon. In fact, the president adding to that from France that it could be years. It could be years. What do you make of all this, Congressman?
Well, Neil, the frightening thing for us is we had Ambassador Crocker, who testified before the Armed Services Committee just a few weeks ago, and he said we had them defeated in 2009, and what allowed them to come back on steroids was the fact that this administration pulled not only all of our military presence out, but all of our political engagement. And then you have the president coming out, and he's talking about them being some kind of JV team, and the fact that we have them contained. And as you just heard, you have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff coming up today and saying we not only haven't had them contained now, but since 2010 we haven't put the resources that we needed to actually defeat them and contain them. So we're very concerned that the president still doesn't have the right strategy to defeat ISIL. We think it's important that he does that.
What do you think, Congressman, of the president linking it with climate change? That, in other words, we don't address this problem, we're going to have a lot more of these ISIS-related problems.
Well, you know, I think very few people, I've had world leaders that have come out of office within the last several weeks, and they tell me the #1 problem on the planet today is not climate change. They're worried about terrorism, they're worried about ISIS, and trying to have some kind of pact that's going to be years down the road is not going to deal with the ISIL threat today. That's what we need him back here, creating a strategy that's going to actually deal with them, not going across the world and trying to get the American people's eyes shifted somewhere else.
You know what worried me, to get back to what you said at the outset, Congressman, this notion that we're sort of acknowledging that ISIS is going to be a problem for quite a while, and maybe a few years, obviously something that the new president would have to deal with when we have the resources, I would imagine right now, because depending on the count, I think within your committee there's some talk maybe 20 to 30,000 ISIS members out there. What do you make of that they're pickable now and we're not doing anything now?
Well, they're only going to be growing, Neil, and one of the things that we've seen, again, he had advice back in 2010 that this was going to happen. This isn't a big surprise, and he just ignored it then, as he has so many other situations on the globe. And then what you have is this thing developing to a situation like it is today. If he continues not to have a strategy to deal with it, can you only imagine what it's going to be 3 years, 4 years down the road? He needs to roll up his sleeves, come back home, develop a strategy, and say we're going to defeat these guys before they come back and cause more harm, not just to us, but across the globe.
All right, so when Ashton Carter talks about special ops forces, anywhere from a few dozen, maybe a few hundred men and women, that sort of thing, it's spoken always in vague terms. Will that be enough? I mean, I've had senators on, John McCain and Lindsey Graham, who say you're going to need thousands. What do you think of that?
Well, you're going to need at least a different strategy. Let me just take one of the things that Secretary Carter said. Before our committee today, he came not only in written form, but verbally said, we're at war. Well, he had to be corrected by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs sitting right beside him. He said, we're not technically at war. And so this president will come back, and the administration will take some strong verbiage and say, we're at war, we've got a strategy. But then we find out that they're doing something else on the left hand, and it's not creating the kind of strategy we need to deal with this very, very real threat today that's going to take a lot of direction from the United States and leadership. Their lack of leadership right now, Neil, has made it so that our allies are very frustrated and our enemies are taking advantage of it across the globe.
Congressman, thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Neil.